Hi students, welcome back to the next video of this chapter wherein we will cover some major topics and few questions. So let's move on to the video without wasting any time. But before, let's just understand which is the topic that we are going to study the next. So the topic is enforcement of the safety laws. So in the previous video we learned about the Bhopal gas tragedy, and we understood what were the consequences of the tragedy and why and how did it actually happen. So in this video we'll actually understand why the enforcement of the safety laws are important and how does it impact if the safety laws are not being enforced. So enforcement is basically the implementation of the safety laws. We'll understand in this video how does it impact the society if the safety laws are not being implemented in the society. Okay. So here's a brainstorming question which says, why do you think enforcement of the safety laws is important in any factory? So here it's mentioned that why do you think enforcement of safety laws is important in any factory? So why do you think? It is quite obvious that in a factory there are machines, there are poisonous gases also, right? As we learned in the example of the Bhopal gas tragedy. So we know that there are poisonous gases in a factory, there are machines in a factory, and that could be a little harmful for the workers who are working in the factory, right? And so it is quite obvious that if there are machines, if there are poisonous gases, that could be harmful for the workers, and therefore there should be safety laws in order to protect the exploitation of these workers in case of any emergency. Now let us just elaborate what I actually said. So as we learned in the Bhopal gas tragedy, now, why do you think that the Bhopal gas tragedy happened at the first place? And why do you think that so much loss happened at the first place? First of all, we also read that, there were no such safety laws that were enforced in our country, and that led to actually a lot of damage in the Bhopal gas tragedy. First of all, the training programs of the safety measures that are to be taken by the workers was cut down to 15 days. It was supposed to be 6 months long, but it was cut down to 15 days. And how much a worker would have learned to protect himself in case of emergency in a 6 months long program, and how much he would have learned in 15 days of program. So this was one of the laws which were not being followed in our country, right? So there is an absence of a law which says that it is important to give the training program to workers. So there is an absence of safety law. Second thing, that industry was set up in a residential area. Obviously, if that industry would have set up in an area where there are no people living around the industry, in case that there would be this emergency, that tragedy wouldn't have damaged so much. It wouldn't have lost so many people in the tragedy if the industry would have set up in an area where there are no residents living around the industry, right? So there should be such laws in the country which says that it is not allowed to set up industry around the residential area. So there was again the absence of the safety laws, right? There was again an absence of the safety laws. So again industry was set up. This industry that was set up in Bhopal was set up around the in a residential area, due to which we lost many people. And in case this industry was set up around an area where there were no residential area around the industry, maybe the loss would have been very less. The loss would have been very less, right? So this was again we can see that there was an absence of the safety laws. Now the third point where we could evidently see that there was an absence of the safety laws was where there were no proper evacuation plans. Now we saw that in Virginia there were proper enforcement of the safety laws, and the government actually made it very strict that there should be proper evacuation plans, and that is why the industry owner made proper evacuation plans in case of emergency in the industry itself. But in India, the factory owner also knows that there are no such strict laws in this country, and in case that it doesn't make the evacuation plan in the industry, in the factory, it wouldn't make a difference. The government wouldn't fine him or wouldn't ask for the penalty, right? Because there are no such laws in this country, and it would be okay to not make evacuation plans. And that is why this was one of the reasons that this Bhopal gas tragedy was such a big damage. If there were to be evacuation plans, maybe we would have lost much lesser people than we actually lost. So this is one of the reasons why enforcement of safety laws is important, because there was an absence of safety laws that said that evacuation plans are important in order to safeguard the exploitation of the workers. The factory owner would have made evacuation plans. So this is again an leniency from the government. Because there were no such safety laws in our country. That is why the factory owner did not took any of the steps. He did not made evacuation plans. He did not gave the training program properly to the workers. He made the industry around the residential area, and all these reasons were actually the reasons that this tragedy made so much damage to the entire city and the people. So these are the reasons why enforcement of safety laws becomes very important in the factory. Moving on, enforcement of the safety laws. Okay, so as we have read many chapters of civics by now, you might know that laws are being made by the government, and if laws are being made by the government, obviously they will be enforced by the government only. If they are made by the government, they will be enforced by the government, right? So it is the duty of the government to ensure that it protects the exploitation, it protects the workers from its exploitation by enforcing the safety laws. It is the duty of the government to ensure that it is protecting the workers from such exploitation by enforcing the safety laws. I will again repeat what I said, that it is the duty of the government to ensure the protection of the workers from the exploitation by enforcing the safety laws. Now, it is the duty of the government to make the laws, first of all, which actually protects the workers from such kind of exploitation. So first of all, it has to make the laws, and in case that it has made the laws, it has to check whether these laws are being properly followed by everyone. And in case the laws are violated, in case the laws are violated, the person should be punished for the same. So it is the duty of the government to actually ensure that it is protecting the workers from such exploitation by enforcing the safety laws. Now, how can it enforce the safety laws? By actually checking whether the laws are being properly followed by each and every one or not. And why it is the duty of the government? Because it is written in the Constitution under Article 21 that it is the right to life of each and every person to not get exploited, and so therefore it is the duty of the government to ensure that the workers are not getting exploited by the enforcement of these laws, by checking whether the laws are being followed by each and every one or not. Okay, so now you might wonder that I'm saying again and again that it is the duty of the government to ensure that there are safety laws. It is the duty of the government to ensure that the workers are not being exploited. So where does all these laws went when the Bhopal Gas Tragedy actually happened? So now you might wonder that where does all these laws went when the tragedy actually happened? So basically, when the tragedy happened, that time the laws, first of all, the laws, either they were not there. Laws were not there only. They did not even existed. No kind of safety laws existed in the country, or even though they existed, they were not implemented. First of all, any kind of safety laws did not even exist in the country at that time of tragedy. And even though they existed, they were not being implemented. So these were the reasons why the tragedy made so much damage in the city. The second reason is the refusal of the government to recognize the plant as hazardous, allowing its operation in the populated locality. Investment and employment provided by the factory was seen as a bigger benefit than the cost. Refusal of the government, investment and the employment. Now let's understand this. Now, even though the safety laws were not there in the country, and even though they were not being enforced or implemented properly. Also, the government just for the sake of employment of few people. It actually ignored the fact that the industry will harm so many people in case an emergency happens in this industry. Now what did the government did? The government actually knew, that industry will cause a lot of harm to the people in case an emergency happened in this factory. In case anything happens in this factory, it will cause a lot of harm to the people. But still it ignored this fact just because they were happy for the fact that an industry is setting up in the city, and it will give employment to so many people. Because it is quite obvious if you think that if industry will be set up around the people, if industry will be set up where people live around that place, obviously that industry will get labor very fastly. And you know that there is unemployment in our country, so workers are so willing to work at any wage rate that the industry will face no problem in hiring the workers. The workers will be there at the industry, willing to work in the industry, so it will be very easy for the industry to get cheap labor, and it will also help the labor, it will also help the workers to get the job. So the government was actually happy for the fact that so many people will get employed, so many people will get the work. But it ignored the very important fact that it is going to be set up in an area which is surrounded by so many people, where so many people live, and in case an emergency happens, it will cause damage to so many people. It actually the government in India is very lenient, as everybody knows there is corruption. And the government is so lenient that until and unless something happens, the government of India does not realize that, oh, something big has happened in the country. Until and unless that thing will happen, they wouldn't realize that some safety laws are to be made in this concern. So the government over here, before the tragedy happened, it was also very lenient that, okay, we'll see if something happen. It actually ignored the fact. It ignored the fact entirely, and they were like very lenient that, okay, it's okay, nothing will happen. If it's something will happen, we'll see to it. And they did not even imagine that something so big could happen. So this is the lenience. This shows how lenient, how lenient the government of India is. And obviously, we all know that in India, it is until and unless something happens, they wouldn't make the laws against that particular thing. They will actually wait for the thing to happen, and then they will take serious steps against it. So the same happened in the case of Bhopal Gas Tragedy. Moving on. New laws to protect the environment. Now, environment we know is a public facility. Now, how can I say that environment is a public facility? In the previous chapter, we understood how water is a public facility, how education, how health is in a public facility. In this chapter, we'll understand how environment is a public facility. Everybody deserves to live in a pollution-free, clean and healthy environment. Everybody deserves to drink clean water. Everybody deserves to live in a clean place, right? In a pollution-free, clean place, in a healthy place. And that is why there were new laws made in the country in order to avoid such pollution through the industries, right? So new laws were made by the government, which will be in favor of protecting the environment. So after the entire Bhopal gas tragedy happened, the government actually realized that a lot of pollution was happening in the country. It actually opened the eyes of government that new laws are to be made in order to protect the environment. Otherwise, the industries will keep on making money, it will keep on making the profit, and the entire environment will be so polluted that we'll not be able to even live in this particular environment. So new laws are to be very urgently made in order to protect the environment. And so new laws were made. And this law said that, in case that any industry tries to pollute or pollutes the water or air, will be held accountable. Means that in case that they pollute the water, pollute the air, they will have to pay the penalty. They will have to pay the fine for it. Okay. Now the question says, why do we need laws? Why do we need new laws? Now we need new laws to safeguard the workers and poor section of the society from being exploited. exploited. So basically we need new laws in order to safeguard the workers and the poor section of the society from being exploited by the private companies and the private contractors. All right. The second question says, why are companies and contractors able to violate the environmental laws? Now, as we know that there are no such safety laws in order to protect the workers as well as to protect the environment. So it is very important to make the laws for the environment to protect the environment from getting polluted. And because there were no laws previously, the contractors, the private contractors used to set up their industries anywhere that they wish to and start their work, which used to cause a lot of pollution. Now they used to even set up their industry in the city, in the center of the city, which used to cause a lot of pollution in the city as well. So there is a need for the new laws, there are need for the new environmental laws in order to protect the environment as well as the workers. And this answered the question which says that why are the companies and contractors able to violate? Because there were no such laws, and that is why it was the free will of the contractors to set up their industries anywhere and cause as much pollution as they want, or they sometimes used to even drain the waste products into the rivers, which again used to cause a lot of water pollution. So they used to cause a lot of water pollution and air pollution because there are no such laws to restrict them, which caused a lot of pollution. So there is a need for the environmental laws also as well as the safety laws, right? So I hope that I am able to answer the question. Moving on, environment as a public facility. So as I told you that environment is a public facility and everybody deserves to live in a pollution-free, healthy environment. And that is why we say that environment is a public facility. So now as I told you that new laws were made. So one of the laws that the Delhi court, the state court of Delhi made was that any industry, if it is set up, any industry if it is set up in the center of the city, in the center means in the city, that industry is supposed to either shut down or shift the industry at the outskirts of the city. Means no industry is allowed to be set up in the city. Either it is supposed to be shut down or shift to the outskirts of the city to actually reduce the pollution, also to reduce the pollution in the city, also to reduce the risk of in case any emergency happens in an industry, many people doesn't get harmed, as we saw in the case of Bhopal Gas Tragedy. Because of the industry was set up in the industrial area, it caused a lot of damage to people. So if industry would be set up not in the center, not in the city, so it would reduce the harm that an industry can cause to the people in case of emergency. To basically reduce the harm that an industry can cause to the people in case of an emergency, the Delhi government actually asked the industries to either shift from the center of the city to the outskirts. Also it asked to shift the industries in the outskirts to reduce the pollution in the cities. Now you might wonder that if an industry is creating pollution in the city, obviously it will create the pollution in the outskirts of the city also. And how can you actually, just for the sake of reducing the pollution in the city, you're actually asking the industries to shift to the outskirts? Wouldn't it make pollution in the outskirts also? So the matter remains the same now, that it is creating pollution in the city also, it will create the pollution in the outskirts also. So how or where is the solution to actually reduce the pollution? So the solution is not there. But this particular law caused a problem. It didn't give the solution, but it caused a problem. Now what was the problem behind this particular law of shifting the industries? Now the problem here was that because the industry was set up in the city, there were many workers who used to live around the industry, and those workers used to do the job at those factories. It was very easier for those workers to do the job in those industries. Now when the government asked to shift those industries to the outskirts, those workers who used to do job in those industries lost their jobs. They lost their jobs, and that caused a lot of unemployment. Now here we could see that again due to the implementation of these laws, it exploited the poor sections of the society. And there could be, the government should make laws that could favor all the sections of the society and not just only some part of the society. Now because of these laws, it exploited the poor section of the society, it exploited the vulnerable part of the society, and it did not even help those people. Rather than creating the solution for the pollution free environment, it actually created the problem for the poor section of the society. Now due to this, a lot many factory workers started protesting because of the job that they lost. They started coming together and starting protesting. Now this is one case. There was some other there was some other law also that was passed by the government, saying that there will be beautification drives in the cities. Now what do we mean by beautification drives? Let me just write down that there will be beautification drives. Okay. Beautification drives in the city means that new trees will be grown in the cities. Now those trees will be grown either in the corners of the cities, or in the footpath, on the footpaths, beside the footpaths, right, or in the areas which are not cleaned. And we all know that there are slum areas in the city. There are people who live on the footpath, and just because of the beautification drive was to happen, just because new trees was to be grown on the footpath, people were asked to move from the footpath. Now again, just for the sake of cleaning the city, just for the sake of reducing the pollution in the city, just for the sake of a more healthier environment, you are again exploiting the poor section. You are again asking the poor section to move from that footpath. Now where would they go if they wouldn't have the money? If they would have the money, now they would have bought the house, but they don't have the money. That is why they're staying on the footpath. And if you are again asking them to move from there, where would they actually go? So laws are not supposed to support one section of the society and exploit the another, right? So these laws weren't actually helping the entire society, it was exploiting the poor section of the society. And so a lot of protests used to happen because of the jobs that they lost, and because of the beautification drives wherein people were asked to move from the footpath. So laws should be made, solutions should be made which actually help the entire society and not just one part of the society exploiting the other part. Laws are the solutions which help the entire society and not just one part of the society, right? So there was a need to solutions, there was a need for the solutions wherein it helped the entire society. Now how or which solutions it could be? So solutions could be like, the government can ask the industries to either change their process of producing. Change their process means they can actually take some steps which could cause lesser pollution. They can actually use some eco-friendly products. They can use the eco-friendly products to produce their products which could cause lesser pollution. Now the government can actually make a law wherein it will penalize the people, the factory owners, which will cause the pollution in that area, right? So these steps could be taken in order to actually do the betterment for the society. Now this is not harming the poorer section of the society, and it's neither harming anybody else. So such solutions should be taken in the society which is helpful for the entire society, right, and not just for one part of the society. Now these beautification drives was basically exploiting the poor section, and also the shifting of the industries was again against the poorer section. So such laws should be made which helps the entire city. A clean environment is a public facility. Can you explain the statement? Okay, so as water and as education, as health, environment is also a public facility. Now how can you say that an environment is a public facility? Now actually, it is rightly said that everybody deserves to live in a pollution-free, healthy and clean environment, right? And so it is the duty of the government to basically provide such a clean environment to each and everybody. It is the duty of the government to make such laws which charge penalty and fines to the ones who are polluting the country, who are polluting the state or the city, right? But at the end of the day, in case that the government has made the laws in order to protect the country from getting polluted, but still if the people themselves will will not take care, the citizens of the country will throw the garbage here and there, or cause the pollution, or cause water pollution, or noise pollution, or air pollution, what the government can itself do. So it is rightly the duty of the citizens also it is the duty of the government. So it is actually not just the duty of the government to provide a clean environment to the people. The duty of the government is only to make the laws, right, and to check whether the laws are being followed by each and everyone. But it is the duty of the citizens at the end of the day to follow those laws which have been made by the government. But it is rightly said that a clean environment is a public facility, because everybody deserves to live in a clean environment, in a healthy, pollution-free environment. Okay, so this brings us to the conclusion of this video, where it says laws are necessary to protect the people from unfair practices. Laws are necessary to protect the unfair practices. Yes, it is rightly said that laws are very necessary. Safety laws are necessary in order to protect the workers from being exploited. The environmental laws are necessary in order to protect the country from being polluted. And so laws protect the people, the vulnerable part of the society, against whom the laws are being violated. A major role of the government is to make and enforce the laws so as to prevent unfair practices and ensure social justice. Yes, so it is the duty of the government to make the laws and enforce the laws, and to basically check whether all the laws are being followed by the people or not. And in case anybody violates the laws, the person has to be punished for the same. And by punishing the person, they are basically giving social justice to the people against whom the laws have been violated. And as we saw in the video, in the previous in this video, that there were laws at the time of the Bhopal gas tragedy, but either they were so weak, or they were not, and there were no laws. Either there were no laws, or there were laws but those laws were not being implemented. So it is quite evident that there is a need for the formation of strong laws and the enforcement of those strong laws, in order to protect the workers, or in order to protect the people, the poor section of the society, from being exploited. So there is a need for the stronger laws in order to protect the environment as well as the workers. This brings us to the end of this video. We'll connect in the next video. By then, thank you so much for joining me on Study Room.